Daytona Beach, 1986. The cameras showed up in March. MTV aimed them at the sand, and a mid-sized Florida beach town found out that the mess it was selling, the sunburn, the warm beer, the sidewalk you learned not to look at, was worth more dirty than clean. If you were 25 that spring, you understood exactly what Daytona meant without anyone explaining it. You're around 60 now. The photo's in a box somewhere. $2.5 billion. That's what one casino on the Atlantic City boardwalk, the Revel, cost to build. About the price of the entire original Disney World in today's money. And it sat dark within a single presidential term. Gone. Not sold, not renovated. Abandoned. I stood on the Venice Beach boardwalk years ago, back when the strangeness there was still the good kind, which is exactly why this one got under my skin. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a filthy tourist town. The places that stayed dirty the longest weren't the ones nobody was watching. They were the ones making the most money from the dirt. Two kinds of grime run through this whole story, and only one of them was an accident. I'll show you both, the three decisions that separate them, and the one place still running the dirty version in 2026. So here's what I kept circling. When a spot you paid good money to visit rots, who's pocketing the cash while it does? And when it finally gets cleaned up, who gets swept out so the postcard looks right? The product was the dirt. Panama City Beach banned alcohol on its own sand for the whole month of March in 2015, and some bar owners watched revenue fall as much as 60% almost overnight. Before this story ends, the government of New Jersey will take the checkbook away from an entire American city its own voters had elected people to run. Keep that in your back pocket. That alcohol ban is where the machine shows itself. Panama City Beach had spent years selling itself as the biggest spring break town in the country. Then, one spring, a house party turned into gunfire that hurt 7 people, and a videotaped assault behind a nightclub hit the national news within days of it. The city panicked and did the math. Bars closed at 2. Scooters and parking got restricted. Online, the hashtag RIPPCB started trending, the town mourning its own product. Word moved fast enough that the next spring, business on the Strip cratered. And that's the paradox under half this list. Nobody gets rich off a clean, quiet Bourbon Street at 2 in the morning. Somebody gets very rich off the opposite. Bourbon Street runs about 7 blocks through the French Quarter. City crews hose the pavement down every single morning before the next round of tourists arrives, which tells you exactly how much piles up there overnight. The daiquiri shops sell drinks in cups the size of buckets. The open container laws that make drinking in the street legal are the same laws that guarantee there's nowhere to put the cup when it's empty. The filth isn't a side effect of the business. The filth is the inventory. Daytona ran the same play with beach driving. Cars on the sand, oil streaked into it for years. Cigarette filters and fishing line worked so deep, the city eventually printed anti-litter rules into its official beach guide. Now hold one picture while all of this rolls. Somewhere on the Venice Beach boardwalk in California, a shop owner had spent decades building an eclectic little storefront, the kind of weird, specific business that made people pull off the highway. Every dollar that town earned off its own strangeness, that shop helped make. Remember them. Here's the loss nobody put in the brochure. Every bar owner who tried to run a cleaner room lost the crowd that paid his rent, and lost it to the guy next door who didn't bother. Clean was a competitive disadvantage. That's not one operator's moral failure. That's the whole street, priced to reward the mess. Atlantic City kept losing casinos anyway, and Trenton kept watching from a distance. The number that would end a city's control of its own money was almost finished being written. The other kind of dirty. Not every ruined boardwalk was a business plan. Some were just left to rot, left to burn. Charles Denson grew up in the west end of Coney Island. He has said he grew up to the sound of sirens and the sound of fire, a near nightly thing, close enough that a kid learned to tell the two apart by ear. The great amusement parks that had made the place the capital of American fun were closing or already gone. The boardwalk his parents had walked was going soft under his feet. Buildings on his block emptied out, and the ones that didn't empty tended to catch fire. He watched a neighborhood come apart the slow way, one lot at a time, and then documented every piece of it with a camera, because someone had to. I've read what Denson wrote about that stretch, and the detail that sticks with me isn't the fires. It's that a boy could name them by the sound. The rot had a paper trail. Redlining maps drawn in 1938 had marked Coney Island as a place where owners couldn't get a mortgage or insurance, which meant honest landlords couldn't afford to keep buildings standing, so slumlords and arsonists took them instead. It took a grassroots group, Estella Development, formed in 1975 to start filling the empty lots back in. And here's where the story turns on you. You came in thinking dirty meant greedy. Half of it is the opposite. Coney Island, Times Square in its deuce years, the block Rolling Stone called the sleaziest in America in 1981. South Beach, when residents wouldn't walk Ocean Drive after dark. Those places didn't get dirty because someone was cashing in. They got dirty because everyone with money had already gone. The greedy version at least kept a register ringing. The abandoned version had no one left who profited enough to care. Which brings us to Galveston, Texas, and one of the more honest lies in American tourism. Galveston's own tourism board looked at its brown, sediment-heavy surf and the litter on the sand and told visitors to stop calling the beaches dirty and start calling them colored with history instead. Except the board had already paid a marketing firm to interview residents and visitors, and that firm came back with the actual words people used. Dirty beaches, an overall unclean feel. And the water wasn't only cloudy from river silt. Monitoring along Seawall Boulevard periodically flagged elevated fecal bacteria, enough to trigger active swimming advisories. They had the report. They picked the slogan anyway. New Jersey was now inside a year of taking Atlantic City's money away from Atlantic City. But the state had already had every warning it needed for years and hadn't moved an inch. Who pays the cleanup? Venice Beach's boardwalk lost its shops before it lost anything else, and by the peak of the crisis, Los Angeles police data showed assaults involving a homeless suspect or victim had more than doubled in a single year. Oceanfront Walk filled with encampments, roughly 200 tents at its worst. New Jersey had watched Atlantic City's casinos close one by one for years, the Revel included, dark after barely 2 winters, before Trenton finally reached for the checkbook in 2016. Nobody in the State House asked to open the books early. They waited until the city was already underwater. The pattern is bigger than one boardwalk. In Venice, the storefronts that gave the place its name went out one after another as foot traffic dried up and insurance and security bills climbed. That shop owner from earlier, the one who'd spent 30 years building something specific and strange, some locked up at noon. Some stopped unlocking at all. More than one described watching a lifetime of work erased inside a year or two. The people who decided Oceanfront Walk's fate sat in offices in downtown Los Angeles. The people who lived with the decision were running a t-shirt shop and a hand-painted stall they'd built themselves. In 2023, the mayor of Los Angeles cleared several of the biggest encampments, and crime in those blocks reportedly fell by close to a quarter. But by early 2026, local reporting still counted the unhoused population there in the hundreds. A social media account that exists only to film the decline has pulled in hundreds of thousands of followers. A business built on the mess. Same as the daiquiri shops, just monetized through a phone instead of a cup. So who's still running the profitable version? Panama City Beach. Recent spring breaks there generated more than 8,000 calls for police in a single season, and after a decade of crackdowns, the crowds and the money are drifting back. Here's the part that reaches your account. The operators who run these places, the casino companies and the resort landlords, are names sitting inside leisure and gaming funds and hotel real estate trusts a lot of retirement money quietly holds. When the model is extract now and clean up never, the write-down eventually lands on a statement somebody already planned around. And the casino that started this whole story, the $2.5 billion Revel, it reopened years later under a new name on the same boardwalk the state now controls. Verdict. In 2016, the state of New Jersey took Atlantic City's finances away from Atlantic City's own elected officials. That's the fact I planted at the start. And it happened not because anyone stole a dime, but because a city had bet its entire existence on one dirty product. And the product finally stopped selling. The Revel cost $2.5 billion, roughly a Disney World, and it couldn't survive 2 winters because the money was never in the building. It was in the crowd, and the crowd goes wherever the next mess is cheapest. What separates the places that came back from the ones that just kept selling the filth runs through every scene here. Profitable dirt always beats the clean room. Panama City Beach proved it. The March 1 bar owner ran a tidy operation and watched his revenue fall 60%. The cleanup, when it finally comes, gets billed to whoever's smallest. Los Angeles cleared the tents, but the Venice shop owner who lost 30 years got no line item. And the people who set the terms never touch the consequences. Galveston's board picked the slogan, while the family that drove 4 hours to brown water and a bacteria advisory picked up the tab. So here's what these places actually are. Not bad luck. They're what happens when a town discovers its worst quality is its most profitable one and builds a whole economy on the hope the crowd shows up faster than the rot does. The dirt was never the failure. The dirt was the balance sheet. I've stopped reading a revitalized tourist district as a happy ending. Somebody always got moved off the sidewalk to make the postcard, and it's usually the person who was there the longest. If you hold a hotel real estate trust or a leisure and gaming fund inside an IRA you plan to retire on, the question worth sitting with is whether the destinations in it make money from being maintained or from being used up. There are 2 more of these towns running the extract and abandon model right now, and I'm tracing where the money lands next. Subscribing is how you'll see it before the write-down does. Next, who bought the Trump Taj Mahal for pennies after it went dark, and what he did with the boardwalk around it. And if you were on Daytona sand for one of those MTV spring breaks, tell me the year. I want to know which crowd you were in. The documents are public. Draw your own conclusions.